Hello, everyone.
I'm Anthony.
And I'm Angelica.
And you are listening to the LDYS Plugged In podcast. Today we are giving you the DL on LDs and the workplace. Before we get into the episode, let's give you some upcoming news.
We are collaborating with registered psychotherapist Nikki Limestone on February 19th for a mental health presentation on self-compassion and coping skills for stress and anxiety for adults with learning disabilities and ADHD. Having ADHD herself and being diagnosed in her adulthood, Nikki personally understands the unique challenges that come along with coping with LD and ADHD and the accompanying anxiety, stress, and negative self-talk.
Join us on Zoom for this informative workshop on February 19th at 7 o'clock p.m. If you're interested in this valuable opportunity, visit www.ldays.org. The homepage will have details about this workshop and our other upcoming programs and services.
We've also got another exciting program coming up, our Social Skills March Break Camp for children ages 7 to 13. This is a great opportunity for children to build valuable social skills, boost their confidence, and have fun in a supportive environment tailored to their unique needs. For more information and to register, visit the homepage at www.ldays.org. Once again, it's www.ldays.org.
Now let's jump into the topic. So our topic for this session is going to be learning disabilities and the workforce. I've been looking forward to this episode for quite a while, both because I think it would be a great way for us all to gain insight and have a discussion, and also on a personal level, I feel like I've experienced this topic in different realms. Long story short, I've worked in a variety of different social service settings, and if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that contrary to popular belief, we tend to look at being learning disabled or having a disability sometimes in the workforce as something static, that's something that you have or you don't have. And that's actually something that I've learned to be is not true. It can be later in life. You know, already there's 1 in 6 Canadians that have some form of a disability, whether that's learning, whether that's physical. And I don't mean that to scare people. I say that to be empowering and basically look for maybe ways that we can learn to foster environments in our workplaces where everybody can feel included and everyone can feel that they're treated in a respectful and dignified way. I'll get off my soapbox now, and Angelica and I can have a conversation, but thank you for at least letting me get that out, Angelica. It's been quite a few days where that's been building up in me, and I wanted to let people know. Yeah, I guess to have a discussion, when you think of this topic, do any experiences come to mind in terms of in your work life, and maybe if you've been in a situation where your learning disability in some fashion has come into play?
Well, definitely. I think we've all struggled through this one way or another. I think the biggest thing is like literally trying to think about, okay, am I going to have a part-time job during high school? And that's where I was like, how do I navigate this? You know, I've already shared in previous episodes how much I've struggled with school in general, with all subjects, and having a place to feel like you're accepted. And I found having a part-time job, which I definitely thank my mother for recommending it to me at the age of 16 and get out there. And I realized I was able to really open up myself and really see the skills you have that you thought you never had and take away those self-doubts of where you're going to end up in life. And it gave me a good idea of what I wanted to do and how I was able to take those skills and take it to the next level. Being able to feel included and be part of something that you never thought you will, because most of us go through the bullying. We go through, unfortunately, like the bad stuff of high school. So I felt like having a work experience at a young age has helped me kind of just find who I am and really feel that acceptance. So I know I can say I was lucky enough I haven't really struggled as much, but when I got into my career that where I am today, I can say, and I will admit to that, I did struggle. It was very difficult because you're working for a big company. It's one of your dream companies that you've always wanted to be a part of. You worked so hard through school, and all of a sudden you get this opportunity and you don't want to just lose it. And it was a struggle navigating it again, especially in the construction industry. Time is money, and it's really true. Time is money. And unfortunately, you don't get that attention that you think you would when previous workplaces, or maybe in previous workplaces, you didn't have to really think about much of the task because you really know what's expected. So when you shift and transition to different jobs and different opportunities because you want to try things out, I think that's where I've struggled the most, because now it's paperwork, now it's deadlines, now I got to do a report, I got to write an email in a professional manner. So those are little things that I feel like I've struggled, and I've always asked for help. I've always gravitated to coworkers that will be understanding, and they're able to help me in ways like, for example, writing an email professionally, right? I think we've gotten used to text messaging our friends in abbreviations that now when you get into the professional world, it's like, I really gotta, it's somebody else on the other line there. And I've always had somebody who will review my email. And that's been a great tool to have, right? Having a secondary coworker to say, hey, can you just review my email briefly? Can you just make sure all the punctuation, grammar, everything is online too? So it was nice to have that.
I'm really happy you brought this up, Angelica, because I guess I think there's a lot of similarities in our experiences, and by proxy, I'm sure with a lot of people listening, maybe they'll find similarities as well, and hopefully take value in what we're saying, and maybe they can gain some insight. For me, I started working when I was around 13 and 14. I was a busboy, for context. And so it's funny, I actually started working a few months before I technically received a diagnosis, and way before learning to accept it. But my point is that for a long time, I didn't think I had to disclose how I learned in the work to the workplace because I didn't think it was relevant. And for a while, that was true. Until I got my first, I guess, in quotation marks, real job. And it goes back to a lot of what you said, writing emails, having a professional decorum, and a lot of, frankly, unwritten rules that maybe even though they're unwritten, they're kind of there and in the culture for a reason. And they're usually specific to like particular fields or workplaces. I found that probably the most difficult to adjust to. Sure, there were things like certain types of offices or workplace settings that can really exacerbate maybe symptoms of your learning disability, but it was more of the cultural things that I thought, oh, this is really a struggle. And I'm very fortunate to have been in places where most of the time I had at least one trusted supervisor, manager that I can disclose certain accommodations that I would need and explain why that would be the case. Although I know that's not entirely the case all the time, but we can get into that later on. So I just found the similarities there were very interesting.
For sure, definitely. And again, I feel like everyone should have the opportunity to try any type of field. Like I came out of retail for 18 years and I've tried every single position, but I found that retail actually worked with my personality. It worked with the pressure that I can handle. And it's funny because I feel like I'm kind of like the opposite in a way where I can handle pressure and I like pressure. So if you were to tell me like a task needs to get done in 30 minutes, surprisingly, I can get it done. Yeah, I would be a little bit stressed, but I can actually manage it. Like it's just my mind just shuts off completely and it just focuses on this task. It's kind of weird because it's a lot of people when you tell them 30-minute deadline, they're like, I don't know where to begin. Right. So it's interesting, but I would encourage, if you're able to, is to, even start with retail, because I feel like social skills is something that we definitely struggle with as we grow older. And that's a great opportunity to start, is in a retail setting. That's how I blossom out of this. Well, besides, there's other things later on in life, but really that's where I found out, wow, I actually have a voice. And why am I hiding it? Because obviously there's that social pressure from high school that when you get into retail, you just become like a whole different person. You learn more about yourself and your skills.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I can definitely see too how a setting like retail can definitely enable someone to foster certain skills, whether it's social, whether it's problem solving, things like that. So that can definitely be worthwhile. I guess in the context of what I currently do, I'm essentially an employment counselor. And the reason I bring that up is a lot of times I'm helping people obviously find work that is meaningful to them and work on their job skills. And something that I come across, if I'm being honest, is sometimes clients with learning disabilities, and I usually disclose as well for the purpose of we can feel more comfortable. I think there's definitely a sense of relatability there. But sometimes what I'm running into with clients is the idea that basically you can have accommodations, and eventually enough accommodations or different work settings will allow you to get over any sort of difficulties or learning curves. And I especially want to stress this to people who are maybe new to the workforce. You are going to run into challenges in terms of adjusting to anywhere if you're new, regardless of your disability status. So it is good to be aware of where your particular strengths are, where maybe there's things you struggle with. But it's also important to note that though that isn't the cause of any struggle that you have in the workforce, fixating on that can kind of make it difficult to further develop and feel adjusted. So just my 2 cents on that. It's something that I've noticed, and I thought it'd be interesting to bring into the discussion.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that because I feel like disclosure is very important. It's very intimidating, and then it can be really hard to navigate because to me, disclosure, I think I did not disclose anything until I would say when I was in my mid 20s. And mind you, for those who don't know or haven't heard previous episodes, I was diagnosed in 1996. So we're talking like a huge gap and a long way to really just be like getting comfortable with myself and being able to disclose. I think one of the biggest fears that we all go through is if we disclose, which is scary. It is a scary thing, but how are they going to react back? Like, what's the high probability of me getting that job? So we tend to overthink things, and sometimes we don't know, like, is this workplace acceptable to hiring individuals with a learning disability? And I feel like now it's gone better. There's more awareness. There's, a lot more people who are understanding. And I feel like if you don't disclose it, then I don't know. Do you feel like you could be set up for failure if you think about it? I don't know. What do you think of that? Because I feel like we all struggle with disclosure.
I think something, and it's why I've sometimes hesitated to bring it up and bring up diagnosis in certain contexts, is I do also think, yes, your standard uh, just maybe discrimination, maybe being looked over if you disclose. I think that's a common and reasonable fear, unfortunately, still. But I also think that there's an aspect of right now, because there's a lot of legal grounds between making sure that a workplace is accommodating for people, whether it's learning disabilities or other forms. I think sometimes I've gone through this fear of if I disclose, people are going to be maybe apprehensive to share further details about like projects with me, or like it's one of those things where maybe they might not necessarily know what my specific learning disability like entails, so they'll avoid bringing it up, not because like they're ignorant or like it's out of malice, but maybe it's okay, this person has this but I'm not an expert in that, so I don't want to misalign them or like cause harm. But the issue is a byproduct of that then is like I'm not being as engaged with, right? So that's something that I always consider if I'm going to disclose. I always try to gauge like how much is this going to impact my work output. Like what I mean by that is how much is my disability impacting my work output. If it's enough where like, okay, this might lead to major issues unless I can receive accommodations, then yes, I think it's appropriate. And then the other thing that I would recommend to others too, at least in my experience, is strategize then. How can you turn this into a learning opportunity? Are you going to feel comfortable having to, I don't want to say redisclose because that makes it sound like it's a form of punishment, but are you going to be okay to have like maybe smaller, shorter discussions with some of coworkers that you trust and to like open the floor to answering questions, because that might be an effect. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that, oh, if you want accommodations in the workforce, well, then you have to be an advocate and too bad. But at the same time, I don't think it's not it's necessarily not a bad thing either.
For sure. And I want to share an experience where my current employer that I've been for 7 years, and I remember this, I was literally nervous. I had this anxiety and, I was with HR, two big managers, and I was just sitting there and I'm like, okay, I've answered everything correctly. I've showed them my experience and I've answered all these questions. And then she says at the end, is there anything else you would like to ask or let us know about? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. Those moments that we get, okay, I'm going to do it. I said, and I remember this, I actually have a learning disability. And she's like, oh, okay, that's no problem. Do you need any accommodations? And I'm just sitting there like a deer in headlights, like, oh, okay, so this is the conversation. So I really felt good about myself. And, I just basically said that I may need some extra time, or depending on the task, maybe I'm not able to do it, but I will speak up and have it handed over to a different person. But I will try my best. I will try my best to my own ability. And if I feel I can't, then I will let the current manager know. And that's how I said it, because you don't want them to think too, like, oh, okay, you can't do anything, because we always think that. I think we judge ourselves too much and what we think what the other person's going to say. So I felt very comfortable, and she says, there's no problem, we can give you whatever combinations you need, you just let us know. And then after that interview, which was the second one, I was just like, you know what, this is actually pretty good. Like, I felt really good about myself. And again, it's so hard. Like, who would have thought later on in life, being at that age around 27 to really disclose it, it's really hard. And I commend anybody who's able to do it early on.
Feels like a weight has been off your shoulders.
Yeah. And it's like, why didn't I do this before? But again, it's just, it's been a while and you just don't know. Like you've mentioned earlier, it's that, they're going to think that I'm not capable or I'm not competent, but we are. We just do it in different ways.
Yeah. You know what? And don't get me wrong, Angelica, I appreciate you sharing that. And I do think that in a lot of cases, I'm hoping, upon disclosing that we work towards a world where that's uniform, that, oh, okay, it's not that big a deal, or do you require any accommodations? But for the sake of this podcast, and I was thinking about this going into, I think it would be intellectually dishonest if we didn't acknowledge that, unfortunately, still, sometimes the opposite situation occurs. And sometimes someone is in a workplace where maybe disclosing would not only not be in their best interest. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying not to receive accommodations, but maybe where a disclosure may unfairly be used against them. And I know it's very easy to say, well, if that's the type of, why would you ever want to be in that type of workplace? But again, to keep it real, everyone has to work. Sometimes, I'm sure if anyone has tried in the last year, again, speaking as an employment counselor, the job market hasn't particularly been a good friend. So it's very easy for us to say, oh, just find another job, but it's not so simple. So I kind of wanted to discuss with you if maybe there's some tips that we can say to someone who's maybe in that situation where, all right, I won't be able to come out with a full diagnosis, but maybe what are ways that I can go around and trying to get some help that I need. And I guess the first thing that I would recommend is, if you can't go to someone you report to or someone that instructs you, maybe try to look for a colleague, a peer. It's why we have peer groups at LDAYS. Peer support is definitely it can be powerful, it can be therapeutic, just to know that you're not completely alone. And in this case, I think it's definitely something that I would recommend. Do you have any thoughts, Angelica?
That's definitely a great recommendation. Also, going to a coworker or maybe talking to somebody who's in a similar position as you. We've got our friend circle too, and all of our friends are not doing the same thing as you. And I feel like I was able to go to two different friends at the time and kind of just say, you know what, like, what is your opinion on this? How would you take it? And I know it's hard because they won't understand it, but also it gives you that perspective of what the reality is, because sometimes they don't even know. And you get to pick their brain of, how could I do this? How can I perform this task? Because I feel like we get so much pressure, and I talk about the pressure a lot because it brings up the stress part of all of it, but also you gotta have some sort of way to talk to somebody about accommodations within your workplace. You got to be able to, maybe there is a supervisor or a lead or somebody that can help you get there, who can understand, that can help you get what you need. And it's hard because you go to a job and you enjoy it, but then something happens, you're given something to do and you can't do it. But you have that fear in you. So you got to talk to somebody about it.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think in addition to being able to talk, I guess for more practical workarounds too, two tips off the top of my head would be that although you obviously don't want to make your current workforce an ensuing legal battle, human resources is there for a reason. You are legally entitled to accommodations that you have a diagnosis for, and you don't necessarily have to go to management or somebody else first. You could go directly to them. The other thing that I would recommend, although this obviously depends on your diagnosis, your particular struggles, and how to best enhance your work, and obviously what you even do for a living, but we live in a world where there's a lot of automation coming and different tools. And just like people, regardless of their disability status, if these tools are available to you, whether it's perhaps different forms of artificial intelligence, whether it's specific equipment that's at your disposal at your workplace, if it makes your job easier, maybe consider using them. And if you are worried about maybe the perception, well, sometimes results can speak louder. So that can, if you find that it makes your work easier, you can frame it in a way to people in your workforce that, hey, this brings about results. Maybe it's a little bit unconventional, but we all have our preferences.
Definitely. And, I feel like with all of this, with asking accommodations, disclosing your learning disability or any form of disability, with the task at hand, whatever it is, I feel like now, all right, the workload has started. How do we navigate it? It's like we talked about transitions, and it's kind of similar in a way, because then you've got the job or you're in that job, you're asking for accommodations or you've gotten accommodations. Now the workload happens. And then we have the stress in the workplace.
Yeah, it can become a lot to deal with when you feel that you're constantly wearing a mask on top of everything else that could be happening at work. But that's why we kind of want to encourage people that when you receive a diagnosis, you are your best advocate. And we don't mean go at it alone, but we do mean that knowing yourself and constantly maybe evaluating can go a long way in generating support for yourself, especially in the long run.
And what do you find is challenging for you when it comes to managing the workload? Again, it's kind of difficult to cover every sector. Like I would say, bring a couple of different examples, because I come from a different industry and so do you. So just to kind of give an idea of people out there listening, how do you manage the workload?
So I guess in my context as an employment counselor, you can kind of frame it as general office work for people listening. So a lot of it is at the desk. Sometimes there's busier periods than others. Sometimes there's corresponding with people who might not even be at your workplace. So in my case, it would be departments of government. But to answer your question, Angelica, I struggle with surprises. And what I mean by that is maybe someone who misinterpreted the time for an appointment and they come in, and even though that's not entirely unreasonable and it's out of my control, I feel this constant need to adjust and just pile onto the workload. And how I get around that is trying to remain organized, setting a calendar, and sometimes not being afraid to set boundaries either. The other things that I struggle with too is personal organization. I can easily say that despite my efforts, it's very easy for me to have the messiest desk in the office. So what I do is I actually allocate even 10 minutes a day, usually at the end of the workday, to have what I call daily cleaning and just reorganizing. And you'd be amazed what you can reorganize in 10 minutes, especially when you do it every day.
It's so true.
It definitely gets.
I have the same problem. I have the messiest desk as well.
Yeah, right. So it's funny. I've applied it to other aspects of my life, and it's whether it's with the car or places
Let
in
me
the
guess, your
home.
room is messy. Just admit it.
It can be. It easily
Okay.
can be. I've grown
Yeah.
to like it. Yeah, it's a little bit. That's a little bit easier. Like you just yeah, if you do 10 minutes in the morning. But yeah, definitely prone to being messy. Yeah, same with the car as well.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that just briefly. Did you find that other people ask you why your desk is so messy?
Not in the workplace because I kind of learned this early, but in school, absolutely. And it felt like so out of my control. And
Yeah.
that's kind of, it harkens back. But I can easily see that turning into a situation with work.
So that's my thing is at work, I have the messiest desk and they asked me why. And I said, that's how I function. And that's my answer.
Yeah.
I function with mess. I said the job site is a mess, so my desk is a mess. So it's like I'm in conjunction. But no, it's true. Like I understand where you're coming from with that because I always struggled with that. Like and it's great that you actually put aside 15 minutes towards the end of the day to really, get yourself, situated and everything. I kind of do that in the morning. So I know, okay, where am I going? What am I doing? Like, is my pen in the cup holder? Like just the little things. Cause I think we overthink things too much too, as well. Like even currently the desk that I use for podcasting, I'm just like, wow, like let's keep adding more stuff. Like, this looks great, right? It's like a pile of a mess. But again, that's how I function. I function off mess, which is very weird to say, but I hope it's relatable to others. And you know what? It's okay. So if you get that question at the workplace, just say, hey, you know what? I function with mess. It's all right.
That actually brings me to another thing I was going to bring up too is it's almost like you said when you present a diagnosis in most cases to management that a lot of times it's a lot bigger in our head than in reality. And I remember distinctly at a previous place I was working at in the context of coworkers, we went from more of a closed desk space to an open desk space, which truth be told, I hate open desk environments and I don't like the norm, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. But sometimes things are out of your control and there are legitimate reasons for both. And my whole point with this story is for weeks, I stressed that I was in a more senior role and I had this worry that, oh, my coworkers are going to think like if I don't constantly present myself as open in this space, they're going to think I'm unfriendly to them. They're going to think I'm not open to receiving feedback for them. And during that time, I try as I might, I'm sure I looked like I was struggling. And it got to the point where I basically said, why don't I just put on noise canceling headphones? I can say it's music, but and then also make it clear that, hey, you can tap me on the shoulder, you can give me a ping through MS Teams, whatever the case may be, and we can talk. Everyone was okay with it. Nobody had the impression I was like, oh, I wish I thought of this multiple weeks before. To me, I draw the similarity when your story, when you're like, oh, should I do it? Okay, I'm going to do it. And then it ended up just being a little blip, like nothing, that they're like, oh, is that all that was? Okay. Again, it goes back to sometimes it's bigger than our heads than the actual reality.
It really is. And that's where it's challenging for a lot of us, managing the workload and managing the stress because, we need those little things. And it's crazy that even in my workplace, you go to the head office and you're like, wow, everyone's in their own cubicles. They're in their own world. Like headphones are on. Who knows? They've got all these devices around them and you're just like, oh, this is so cool. You feel pretty comfortable. And then you go back to my office where it's an active job site. It's the same thing. Everyone's got their headphones. Everyone's plugged in. It's either they're in a meeting or they just need that peace and quiet to get the job done. But at the end of the day, I just love that environment, that culture they created. So not many companies are like that, but we're hoping that they will change and, really give those opportunities to these workers, not just us with disability, but with everybody. Because, it's funny, like I came in super early to work. I was at the job site at 6 a.m. and I had stuff to do because I was actually really stressed. And I said, all right, I'm just going to put some music on. And surprisingly for me, I don't know if it's for you, with music on, I'm able to focus more. And it seems like I have a timer. So I know the song is 3.5 minutes. I can get this, whatever I'm doing, done in 3 minutes. And then another song comes on. Okay, the song is like 4 minutes. So really music helps me focus and manage my stress easily. I know it's weird because you think, well, people are singing. Yes, that's true, but it helps me block the outside world that's really trying to chime in. And when someone is asking for something because they need it for their job and I'm there to help them, then it becomes a little bit complicated. Now that task that I'm supposed to get done yesterday, now it's being pushed and pushed and pushed. Yes, my stress builds up. But again, if I can get it done, I go put my earbuds in, get it done, and I set myself a time. Calendars work as well. But I feel like with my job and an active job site in the construction industry, it's kind of like I got to put the headphones in, put the music on, and focus on the task and get it done.
Yeah, that no, that definitely makes sense. And there certainly is something to be at times where you can work with music. I personally think it gets chalked up to maybe the way our brains are. It's responding to stimuli, like you're almost like matching the output. Granted, for me personally, I like it more for manual tasks. It's something I've noticed, like even just organizing things or typing things. I find music is especially like potent when I use it. And but again, we all have different brains, so it's okay. And yeah, I think it goes back to the idea of just being able to find different habits that work for you, that can bring out the best in you, that can fit within your work environment. Because that is the other thing too. Obviously, there are going to be certain traits of our job that we can't control or certain things that are required, right? So let's say someone, maybe it's social skills and there's a job that they really want to do, but you have to interact to some extent with the public. We would never say to you, oh, well, find a way to have accommodations and just never never interact with like customers. First of all, I doubt that's possible. But second of all, even if it is, you're kind of only selling yourself short. It's okay to feel challenged. It's okay to maybe gradually expose yourself. We would recommend instead to maybe look at LD friendly ways of gradually building up your ability to handle interacting with others, maybe problem solving. Not unlike what you talked about, Angelica, with your first job and being in retail, how it led to almost 2 decades of that, right? Because it went from this is challenging, but it's riveting. And oh, look, I'm learning more skills along the way. And okay, I want to see how much further I can go with this. And it led to, although you're in construction now, you still had a career trajectory in that line of work, right? That would have never started if you came in with the mindset of, this isn't for me, I don't like it, and there's no way it could ever be for me. So that's something that we want to try to get across too, is yes, having LDs and working is definitely not without its challenges, but it's also not without its good moments either, and moments of growth.
No, for sure, definitely. And that's where, I feel like you just got to take the risk. I'm more of a risk taker, and I have very supportive parents who are just like, you know what, just do whatever you want, just try it out. The one thing my dad always says to me, what do you got to lose? Like, you're still living at home. We still support you. It's fine. Just try it. If you don't like it, you just walk away. And I like that because then I'm able to challenge myself and really just be able to try different things. Like, I went into fitness and nutrition. I had a small business. I had another small business in photography. I was in retail. I did every single position you could think of, like shipping, receiving, administrative, like it's management, I was able to really try it out. So I love that I had supportive parents who were just like, yeah, just try it. If you don't like it, you just quit. What do you got to lose? And it's true. What do you got to lose? And it's nice that I live this life without any regrets. And all the experiences I've had have led me to different opportunities. One door closes and another one opens, and you'll be surprised what you're able to accomplish. And the one biggest thing when it comes to really, like, with all of this in the workplace, because it can't be stressful for us, this one really hits home for me, is burnout. And burning out is one of the biggest things that are happening. And since I could say the past probably 5-10 years, we live in this world of the hustle and bustle, and we sometimes don't know when to stop. And this is where, to me, I'm the prime example of how to burn out. And I've taught seminars of how to prevent it. And it's like, it's great because I've gone through 3 burnout phases of my life. And unfortunately, because I feel like with my ADHD and my learning disability and the personality that I am, I have to keep working. For some reason, it's like my brain doesn't stop at night. Yeah, I could say a lack of sleep, but it's just, I'm that person to really push through my limits and boundaries. And having a small business, being a mom to a toddler who is autistic, and also having a full-time career and going to school and volunteering, you start to wonder, how do I do it? I just do it. It's the passion that drives me. And how do I prevent the burnout is really listening to my body this 3rd time around. Actually, I should say 4th time around, and really take the time off I need. So I've learned that January, February, and March, I will completely do nothing extra that I normally do. and then hit the road running come spring all the way through December and hopefully not burn out. Does that even make sense?
In a way, it does. And we can definitely talk about, obviously, seasons affect us much as we try to live in a society where we think it doesn't because we have insulation and electricity and all that good stuff. But I think right there, you personalized it, but it's definitely insightful that there's nothing wrong with wanting to push yourself, but just recognizing your limits. And I don't find anything alarming of what you said, Angelica. I think you definitely have a busy calendar. But if you said like, yeah, I'm starting to pass out at work, or like I'm like, I'm getting health reports of like concern for my doctor, maybe we've had like a more serious and like different conversation. But I think to me, it sounds like, okay, I've kind of like realized that I can't be 100% all the time, not certainly due to lack of motivation, but because I'm going to have unintended consequences for myself if I do. So how can I best alleviate myself at certain times of the year, whether that makes sense in the context of my job in the busy season or whichever fits my preferences, to keep doing the things that I love and keep learning and keep immersing myself into new worlds. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be gained from understanding that experience.
For sure. And all I can suggest is if you're like me, who's got that personality and that drive, I think just take it slow at the meantime until you're being able to manage all the millions of things. And it also relates to different positions in the workplace. You may just have this one position title, but then you're wearing 10 different hats, right? And it can be overwhelming and stressful. But again, I feel like most of us can deal with pressure in some sort of way or another. I don't know if it's with you. I know I've asked you this question earlier, but I just feel like we can handle being under pressure in a weird way. Am I wrong? Or how is it like for you?
I think you're right. I think it comes from years of having to do things kind of in a hidden way where you're different and maybe you understand to an extent that why you're different, but you don't feel comfortable telling others. And it's like the expression pressure makes a diamond. The coal, you get what I mean. But I guess to anyone listening who maybe adapting to pressure is not their forte, that's definitely all right. And I guess what I would say to that is it's okay to have a preference, but maybe consider, again, it goes back to gradual exposure. And believe me, I've tried to outplan my way out of this fact, but sometimes life is going to throw curveballs at you. Sometimes you're going to have unexpected busyness or situations that you have to do, no matter what line of work you're in, because it can definitely happen in your personal life as well. And again, not saying this to scare people, but to empower. These are just insights that two people have gained having a conversation, and we're hoping you can derive some value out of this.
Also, don't be afraid to ask for help. I think I've said this before in previous episodes. Asking for help is definitely something that if you feel like it's overwhelming and challenging, talk to a friend, a sibling, or family member, whoever it is, go to them first and then try to navigate, okay, do I talk to another coworker? It's another thing that we face, especially in the workplace. Your colleagues. Your colleagues are the people that you see day in and day out, the people that you see most of your days, most of your weeks. And you eventually either become family or you don't. And I feel like working with people, it's not easy. That's just general across the board. You can come up with many books. I've read so many books in my management time. Surprisingly, I've read those books because I'm so intrigued how to deal with different personalities. And there's one book that really stuck to me that I actually read it through because I was like, you know what? This is very insightful. And it all comes down how you treat people, your delivery, also vice versa. And you start to realize, okay, I met you, you're cool. You met you're all right, I'm trying to get to know you. And then all of a sudden, when you get comfortable, that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to tell them I can't do this because I have a learning disability. I actually said that the other day because this is a whole new job site, whole new team. Been doing it for a couple months now. Exciting new role, a huge transition in my life as I feel like the weeks go by super fast. It's just crazy busy. And I said it. I was just like, I can't do it. And they're like, well, why can't you? And I said, I just can't. I'm like, can you help me out? And they're like, yeah, don't worry. So we've built that confidence and be able to share those experiences. Funny enough, before doing this episode, I was actually at headquarters doing a voiceover work for one of our videos. And the gentleman's like, you're saying this word wrong. Like the pronunciation, you're not pronouncing it wrong. And I said, I can't say it. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. And that's where I said, listen, I have a learning disability, okay? Like, if we're going to be repeating this word 10 times, it's not going to happen because my brain needs to, like, break it down into syllables, try to figure out. We don't got much time here. So it's either you try to edit it out or you try to get someone else's voice in there or get AI to do it. I have no idea. But, I felt comfortable. And that's the thing. Like I was able to tell somebody else, a colleague within the company who's doing all the editing and video for us. And I was just like, I can't say it. And it was the word permanent. Apparently I said it correctly.
It's a lot to take in, Angelica, but I appreciate you being so forthcoming. And I guess at least what I get from that and what you're saying is you don't have to be everyone's friend in the workforce. And what I mean by that is treat people with kindness. I mean, sometimes you're not going to mesh with people, and that's okay. We all have different personalities, or sometimes you are going to mesh with everyone, but there's going to be people you mesh with more. But when you build like this sense of comfort and kind of this notion that, hey, we all are here for a reason. We're all drawn to this kind of work. Maybe we have different strengths. Maybe we fulfill different purposes, but it can be a lot easier if we try to lift each other up as opposed to trying to do everything ourselves. At least that's what I'm hearing from you. Maybe there's things that in your position that come really easy to you, and maybe if someone's struggling, you're able to take in to a certain extent while they learn the craft further. Mm-hmm. Or you can have an atmosphere where you can just be honest and say, hey, for whether it's because of something with my diagnosis or not, I'm really struggling with this. The way you're helping me, I understand it, but maybe you need to be a little bit more clear. Maybe you need to try this. And if you can have a work environment that's reciprocal like that, where like someone can say the same to you, I think it makes the days much easier and much more fun you feel like you're genuinely part of something.
For sure. And again, with the workplace, I feel like we are trying to, depending on the situation, we try to really feel included, right? But you will get some instance where coworkers are just like, what is a learning disability? And unfortunately, you're going to get that negative impact of like, what, are you dumb? Like, is it because you can't do it? And unfortunately, you're going to hear that. So how do you overcome it? To me, in my opinion, it's kind of like, wait a second, let's have a conversation. Let me try and educate you what I'm trying to tell you. You may not be familiar with it. Let's talk about it. If you don't know what is a learning disability, let's have a chat. Let's sit down. Let's have this conversation. Because there's so many people out there that don't even know that there's this thing called a learning disability. And it's a little bit alarming for me, to be honest, because we hear it all the time, and it's depending on the corporation. And especially for me, if I were to hear another coworker say, I don't know what a learning disability is, I'll be like, really? Because our company is really striving for inclusive diversity in every aspect of, A, B, C, D, E, and F, like covering all bases. You know what I mean? So yeah, I feel like you got to build that comfort and kind of be like, you know what, do you know what it is? Let me explain to you what I struggle with. And I've gone through instances where people just didn't understand it. And I said, well, you can't teach me by giving me, a manual. You have to visually teach me what you are actually looking for. And I love that most of the places I've worked at, everybody's a visual learner. I could say 70% of them were visual learners. So I was very fortunate to be able to gravitate to those people and say, you know what, I'm not getting this. You need to visually show me. And it took them 5 minutes. And I was like, oh, okay. So why is it on paper more difficult? Again, it's because some of us are visual. And if you're given a manual how to do something, it's going to be difficult, especially for me.
Right. And it goes back to kind of what we've been saying during this whole episode is if you feel comfortable, the workplace can be a great environment for you to foster maybe mutual collaboration, a learning opportunity. But that's only going to work if you know yourself, if you accept yourself, which is always something that we try to drive by having conversations like this. So I'm definitely well put, Angelica.
And that brings us to the end of this discussion on LDs and the workplace. We hope you've enjoyed the insights, but let's recap what's important to remember.
Things that we've tried to drive home in this episode were certainly knowing yourself, knowing your strengths and things that can work on, especially when you're new to a workplace, knowing that sometimes adjusting to any workplace or building rapport with team members is going to be a struggle, regardless of your disability diagnosis, but that can also come with benefits, development, and just having a sense of accomplishment and feeling like you're part of something and all that comes with it.
If you're looking for more support or resources, remember that we have a variety of programs available through the LDAYS website, www.ldays.org.
One program we'd like to highlight is JobFit, a program for individuals with learning disabilities and ADHD to explore interests, strengths, and areas of need in order to pursue employment and how to ask for accommodations in the workplace. This is a 6-week program aimed to close the gap between where you are today and where you want to be. If you're interested in learning more about JobFit, email info@ldays.org. That's info@ldays.org. And don't forget, we also have programs for children, like social skills and SOAR, well-being programs, support groups, and more.
Lastly, we want to express our gratitude to our listeners for their ongoing support and for following along on our journey as we strive to provide actionable strategies and resources.
On behalf of LDAYS, we encourage you to consider donating, which goes to fund our programs, services, and future episodes. Your contributions play a crucial role in helping individuals with LDs in developing the skills necessary for success. If you're interested in donating, kindly e-transfer info@ldays.org. Once again, that's info@ldays.org.
That wraps up today's episode. If you'd like to hear more from us, be sure to stay connected through our social media, website, and newsletters for updates on our upcoming episodes.
I'm Anthony.
And I'm Angelica, and this is the LDAYS Plugged In.